She was 10 years old. She had a key around her neck. Her parents were working or gone, and when she walked through the front door, there was nobody there. No one to tell her what to do, no one to help with homework, no one to ask if anything was wrong. And here's the thing that should stop you. That little girl didn't grow up traumatized. She grew up competent. She grew up capable of handling anything. She grew up into the woman who, right now, is running a household, managing a career, supporting aging parents, raising kids, and doing all of it without asking for help. But here's the question. Nobody ever asks her, if she is this capable, this competent, this extraordinary, why does she feel invisible? And why, no matter how much she carries, can she not put any of it down? This video is going to give you words for something you have always felt but never been able to fully explain. We are going to trace exactly how a specific set of childhood experiences built a specific psychological wiring, and why that wiring makes you one of the most capable people in any room and one of the loneliest. Not as a criticism, not as a complaint, but as an explanation. Because if you are a Gen X woman, or you love one, or you work alongside one, understanding the why changes everything. But to get there, we have to start with one thing about your childhood, and it's not what you think. Here is a number that should shake you. 7 million. By 1984, approximately 7 million American children between the ages of 5 and 13 were regularly unsupervised after school. 7 million children coming home to empty houses. Now, most people hear latchkey kid and think, oh, a bit lonely, a bit sad. But psychologists describe something far more precise and far more consequential. They call it a high-contingency environment. What does that mean? Here's the simplest way to think about it. Imagine you're learning to ride a bike. In a low-contingency environment, there's someone running alongside you is catching you when you wobble, adjusting your grip. In a high-contingency environment, you fall, you hit concrete, you figure it out, you get back on. There is no cushion between your action and its consequence. That is the childhood that wired your nervous system. Here is what the research tells us happens to a brain raised in that environment. It does something extraordinary, and something costly. It develops hyper-independence, not as a personality trait, as a survival response. Your brain ran a loop over and over for years. Nobody is coming. Nobody is coming. Nobody is coming. Until eventually, it stopped generating the option to ask for help at all. It's not stubbornness. It is a neurological default established through thousands of repetitions. And here's the part nobody tells you. You didn't choose it. It was chosen for you by an empty house and an afternoon that lasted too long. You also absorbed something else in that empty house because the house didn't just need to be survived, it needed to be managed. Dishes needed doing. Siblings needed feeding. Order needed maintaining. Psychologists call it the silent internship, a years-long, unpaid, completely unrecognized training program in logistics, responsibility, and emotional self-regulation. You didn't know you were being trained. You thought you were just getting through the afternoon. But your nervous system was taking notes, and it never stopped. So you grew up, and you were told something extraordinary was waiting for you. The world had opened its doors, the glass ceiling was cracking, the boardrooms were opening. You were the first generation of women who could have it all: career, family, success, freedom. You were handed an identity before you were old enough to question it. Superwoman, have it all, be it all, and the cruelest part, you believed it, because why wouldn't you? But here's what nobody mentioned. The doors opened, the support didn't follow. No widespread affordable childcare, no standardized paid parental leave, a corporate culture still quietly built on the assumption that someone, some silent, invisible someone, was handling everything at home. So here's what actually happened. You walked through the door of the boardroom, and then you went home and started the second shift. Not instead of the career, on top of it, because that's what you'd been trained to do since you were 10. There's a name for this, but you already know the feeling. You finish one full day of work, and then you start the second one, at home, alone, without anyone acknowledging it exists. And if you struggled, the culture called it a personal failing, poor time management, insufficient ambition, not a structural problem. Yours. The have-it-all promise didn't liberate you. It doubled your workload. And because you had been training since childhood to just figure it out without complaint, you absorbed it. You told yourself the exhaustion was the price of the equality you'd asked for. Now here's where it gets even more specific, because it's not just the physical labor, the cooking, I am the cleaning, the driving. There is an entirely invisible category of work that you are doing right now as you watch this. Work that has no name on a to-do list. Work that almost nobody sees. But it is relentless. Think about this. Who in your household knows when the dental appointment is? Who notices when someone has outgrown their shoes? Who is tracking whose birthday is coming up? Which bill is due? When the car last had a service? Who is holding all of that in their head right now all the time? For most households, research tells us the answer is the same. It's you. And here's the thing that makes this so hard to explain to anyone who hasn't felt it. This work is invisible. It doesn't appear on a shared calendar. It doesn't get applause when it's done well. It only becomes visible when it falls apart. There's a term for this: cognitive labor, the thinking work. And research from the University of Bath and the University of Melbourne found something that should stop you cold. Even when you earn over $100,000 a year, even when you have a high status career, your mental load does not decrease. You can outsource the cleaning, you can hire help, but the planning, the tracking, the orchestrating, it stays with you. Once you are established as the person who holds everything together, the role almost never gets renegotiated. Nobody takes it off you. You just keep carrying it. The result is a state of permanent mental overflow, an always running background program that takes up space even in the meeting, even on the commute, even in the rare moments that should be rest. And here is the cost nobody mentions. The reason you can't ask for help isn't a character flaw. It's a program that has been running since you were 10. The woman who manages everything eventually becomes the management. It is no longer something you do. It is who you are. And somewhere underneath all of that, the girl with the key around her neck is still there, waiting for someone to ask how she's doing. Now, here's where the timeline gets brutal, because just as you have navigated all of this, the childhood, the impossible promise, the invisible labor, you hit midlife. And midlife, right now, is not a gentle transition. It is what some researchers have bluntly called sniper's alley. Here is what that actually looks like. And this applies whether you have children or not, because the sandwich isn't always literal. Sometimes it's your team at work on one side and a parent in decline on the other. Sometimes it's every person in your life needing something, and you in the middle, making sure none of them feel it. In the UK alone, approximately 1.4 million people are simultaneously raising children and supporting aging parents. 61% of them are women. The primary age range is 45 to 64. That is you. But what makes this window especially brutal is that it doesn't arrive alone. It collides. Career redundancy, post-divorce relocation, a child's mental health crisis, a diagnosis, all arriving in the same 5-year window. Unpredictable, layered, each one manageable alone, but together, crushing. And here's what the research shows about how you handle it. 9 out of 10 Gen X women do not seek help for their mental health during this period. Not because you don't need it, but because asking for help was deleted from the menu when you were 10 years old. Your body is changing. Perimenopause arriving with fatigue, low mood, anxiety, and too often your doctor reads it as stress rather than a hormonal transition. Because you present composed, because you have been presenting composed since 1978, here's what I want to say clearly. You're not struggling because you are weak. You are struggling because you were built to carry weight that most people never see, and you have been carrying it silently for decades. The competence you built in that empty house is extraordinary, but it came with a price, and that price is that you genuinely do not know how to put the load down. But here's the part of this story that is changing, because your generation, the generation that watched every institution let it down, is quietly, defiantly rewriting the rules. Here's something counterintuitive. The generation most likely to have stayed in unhappy situations, the generation raised to absorb pressure without complaint, is also, in midlife, the generation most willing to walk away from things that no longer serve them. Research shows that 57% of single Gen X women between 50 and 70 are choosing not to pursue new romantic partnerships. Not because they've given up on connection, but because they have done the maths. They know what partnership has historically cost them. The second shift, the mental load, the silent labor, and they are choosing their own time, their own autonomy, their own peace instead. There is something researchers are calling living apart together. Committed partners who love each other, but who maintain separate homes, separate finances, separate domains, intimacy without the domestic friction, connection without the second shift. And more broadly, this is your generation discovering, often for the first time, what it feels like to ask a question nobody ever taught you to ask. Not what does everyone need from me? What do I want? Not what is required of you, not what keeps the system running, not what you absorbed as your role before you were old enough to question it. What you specifically want from your work, your relationships, your remaining decades. And the research on this is striking. The women reporting the highest well-being in their 50s are not the ones who stayed and endured. They're the ones who finally asked that question, who stopped being the system and started being a person. You were forged, not broken, and you are only now in midlife beginning to spend the resources you accumulated. If this landed for you, if you heard yourself somewhere in this, share it with someone who needs to see themselves in it. Leave a comment telling me which part resonated most. I read them, and this conversation matters. The next video goes deeper into the psychology of resilience, identity, and what it actually looks like to put the load down. It's right here when you're ready. And one last thing, if you are the woman with the key around her neck, you were seen here.